everybody. It's fantastic. If you want to learn more about the topic of flying saucers and everything I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the year, there's a little schedule up there. On the 11th of July, there's going to be a great one-day UFO conference in Fairborn. It's called the Dayton UFO Conference in Fairborn. We can only do that, right? Host it in one city, call it another. But that's going to be good because Michael Sheehan, Esquire, is going to be there. He's the head of the Disclosure Movement. He's the keynote speaker. They've got Donald Schmidt, who did all the Roswell research. He's going to be there. I will be there. I'll give a talk. There'll be panels. There's a special event on the night before, like a meet and greet. It's part of a package. So I get to be socialite for an evening. And then the big event for me is the MUFON International UFO Conference in Covington. It's a 3-day affair. I'll be all over the place, a panelist, discussing, giving a talk, all that good stuff, and then a lot of local things. Okay, so good evening and welcome. Let me begin by thanking the Museum Association and Doug McClellan, who unfortunately could not be here. I think he chickened out. It's a great honor, actually, to be here, and I've had a chance to talk with some of the individuals that worked here, and I'm telling you, for the first time, I am not the smartest person in the room. 100%. So in 1997, there were mass sightings of UFOs over Phoenix, Arizona, and officials at nearby Luke Air Force Base in Glendale tried to explain these sightings by saying they were drop flares. Well, this explanation is just about one step above the weather balloon explanation, and nobody believed it. So at that point in 1997, I began a very serious quest to find out the truth just for myself about flying saucers. Now, we all have different approaches to research, but my particular approach was, as I was going to examine some of the best documented UFO cases, and then I was going to try to debunk them, effectively just shoot holes in them, because then I could just ignore all the scuttlebutt that I'd heard all those years on the base. Well, what happened was exactly the opposite. The more I deeply researched the topic, the more evidence I found that it's true. In 2016, I published what I had learned in my first book, 50 Shades of Grays, which nearly got me a lawsuit with those people who do all that smutty 50 Shades of Grays. Yeah, I know, don't get ahead of me on this one. So, and then from there, I took the deep dive, and you're going to hear a lot about this evening. I investigated the alien abduction enigma, and that spawned my second book, Victoria's Secret Truth. No, they did not sue me on that one. And that book is about a family that has had alien contact for 3 generations. It's an interesting story. I did a study for 2 years, and I actually spent a month living with that family to find out more about them and just deeply investigate to make sure what they were telling me was true. And then finally, I was cosmically chosen to tell the story of one Colonel Gary Kent Carroll, a retired Air Force pilot who was ready to tell his UFO secret to somebody, and that somebody was me, and you'll hear more on that later. Well, I became interested in the topic of alien abduction in 2012 after I met Victoria Fitzpatrick at the International UFO Congress that year. Victoria and I had some conversations regarding what she said were random stories, but they didn't sound random to me. So together we attended what were called experiencer sessions, and that's where the people can tell their stories about their alien contact, and truthfully, some of those stories were out of this world. Well, according to the experiencers that I heard in the room that week, the people are taken from their bedrooms, parked cars, campfires, dark roads, whatever. They're taken aboard a spacecraft of some sort, then are subjected to either medical procedures or psychological conditioning. When aliens are done, the experiencer is returned back to an approximate location from where they were taken. And that has spawned a lot of funny stories for experiencers. As it turns out, tens of thousands of humans around the world have reported alien encounter experiences. Thousands of these experiences have been thoroughly documented under the watchful eye of trained hypnotherapists, many of whom you will meet tonight. I believe the current preponderance evidence is overwhelming that these abductions are taking place, as you will soon see. And the crucial question here is, are these abductors friend or foe? Now, the ideas that humans could possibly be treated as laboratory specimens by extraterrestrials is an idea that can lead to the onset of ontological shock, basically changing your sense of reality. But that's really not my purpose tonight. If you've been reading the headlines or watching the news, you know that the government has finally admitted that flying saucers are real. It took 75 years for this admission to take place. So in another 75 years, you'll be hearing about tonight's topic in the headlines and on the news. So I'm here tonight just to get all of you a little bit ahead on the knowledge curve. Now, before we dive into this formidable task, let's take care of some essential and possibly amusing mound trivia. In November of 2017, the then MSEMA director, Dr. Ellefson, is he here? Good evening, sir. Perfect. I think I can outrun him.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Dr. Ellefson initiated contact with me and asked me if I'd like to address his group. I eagerly replied, hell yes, let's do it. Then, apparently using the half-life of zinc-65 as his time clock, it was 8 months before Dr. Ellefson conclusively replied. The invitation was withdrawn because apparently there was no evidence of flying saucers. So tonight, I hope to provide evidence that that statement might be a few electrons short of a stable isotope. I just have to get a nuclear joke in there. So that's for the record. And anyone who sends me an email, I just prove I hang on to them babies. Because you know what karma is, right? Okay. So for the record, just to be clear, we're still buds. I did not take that rejection personally because I figured most people in the world were actually quite uninformed about the topic. I mean, you're busy creating nuclear triggers and sending things out in space on Voyager for 100,000 years. And, you know, why would you be interested in aliens? So anyway, since I am Josh Gates' Wright-Pat guy, and he said so on the air, I helped to arrange the filming of the Expedition X premiere right here at the Mound in August of 2019. The episode aired in February of 2020. And if you look under that little X there on the left, that's my big fat head. These are the original series hosts, Phil and Jessica. Some of you probably, anybody here recognize that hallway?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so unbeknownst to the audience behind the scenes, the showrunners were trying to get me to say that the Mothman event, which allegedly happened in West Virginia, was actually an Air Force top secret experiment gone bad. For the record, I vehemently resisted their top secret government experiment gone bad theory because it did not hold up to my critical thinking. And I'm not into sensationalism. Apparently, my reluctance to fabricate evidence has not made me a favorite of the producers, and they are no longer returning my emails. So thus far, I've said that extraterrestrials are taking humans aboard their craft for a variety of experiments. But in order to have alien abductions, the aliens need a way to get here, don't they? And that's most likely a flying saucer. So following a simple logic chain, if we have no flying saucers, that means we have no aliens. And if we have no aliens, there are no alien abductions. Slam dunk. So, are flying saucers real? From June of 1947 until June of 2021, there were no flying saucers. Or so the government told us. Their official position on flying saucers was, these things do not exist. They insisted that what we were seeing were mirages, weather balloons, the planet Venus, mass hysteria, swamp gas, and according to my good friend and the preeminent Stevensville, Texas UFO witness, Mr. Steve Allen, it was a reflection off my shiny white ass is what it was. and that aired on the Ancient Aliens show. Scout's honor. So, no flying saucers. What a relief. We're done here. But wait, on 25 June 2021, hell froze over. After 75 years of organized UFO cover-ups, the 2020 Intelligence Authorization Act, passed by Congress, forced U.S. intelligence agencies to surrender some of what they knew about flying saucers. In their initial public report on the subject, government officials admitted knowledge of 144 aviation encounters by the military with flying saucers. Of those 144 events, they were able to solve one of them in a 12-month period. Not very reassuring, is it? Deeper in the report, they concluded the following. Flying saucers are real, but they're not calling them flying saucers anymore because they're trying to confuse us. They're called UAPs, and they've even changed that twice. It's unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified anomalous phenomena. It's the UAP acronym du jour. Then deeper into the report, they said the UAPs are definitely a safety of flight hazard. True story. And finally, they said that they were a potential national security problem. They have done 4 more reports, and thus far they have reported over 1,700 military and commercial pilot encounters with flying saucers. So I'm going to ask the audience a couple of questions during the evening, and you are under no obligation to answer. But, you know, it's not an official poll, but it just kind of helps me guide where I'm going to go along for the rest of the evening, what points to emphasize and kind of what to ignore. By an honest show of hands, how many people were even aware before they saw the slide that this document existed? Show of hands. That's actually above the norm. In a room of about 200, I get 2 hands. Okay, now for a more honest show of hands, how many of you actually read this 9-page report front to back? 1 person. Fantastic. That's about the average. And that's Kevin Shrewbridge, isn't it?
Yes.
Kevin, are you out of WITSEC now?
Do what?
Oh, sorry. I wasn't supposed to out you. In fact, Kevin is the guy that raised his hand in Bellbrook. He was the one guy. So there you go. Not an official poll. So prior to release of that 2021 ODNI, Office of Director of National Intelligence, 9-page UAP report, any pilot, commercial or military, admitting to a flying saucer encounter almost guaranteed an end to their flying career and made them targets of hostile blowback. The 2 former military pilots and the 1 intelligence officer pictured here all reported UFO activity to their superiors while employed by the government. Navy Commander David Fravor testified that he and many members of the Black Aces Squadron, which he led, encountered advanced, unexplained technology that could drop instantly from 80,000 feet in a few seconds, then stop instantaneously just above the ocean surface. That squadron also made several other observations on these objects, which forced them to conclude that the UAP capabilities were not of terrestrial origin. Navy Lieutenant Ryan Graves testified that a systematic and powerful official stigma was in place to prevent military and commercial pilots from reporting UAP encounters, even those encounters that threatened the lives of the pilots. And finally, David Grush testified that the government has been operating a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program without proper congressional oversight. Yep, flying saucers are real. And now we have to ask some of the uncomfortable questions like that posed by Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. Admiral Tim Gallaudet actually read official classified Navy communications confirming that UAPs buzzed Navy jets while on maneuvers. He made this particular statement on the 2nd of August, 2023, right after the Capitol Hill appearances of Fravor, Graves, and Grush. He said, "We need to understand where they come from, who controls them, and what their intentions are." Now that we have established flying saucer reality, let's try to answer Admiral Gallaudet's question. What are their intentions? How are we doing so far? Any ontological shock? Good, I got 1 thumbs up, yeah. Your check, I'll give that to you later. Great. So the remainder of the presentation will look like this. What do I know about alien abduction? What do the most famous alien abduction researchers know? What do my friends know about the aliens after their abductions? And then some conclusions about intentions. For over a decade, I have studied the works of the most prominent alien abduction researchers in the United States and possibly the world. I've read their books, watched their videos, attended their live lectures, and in many cases have had personal and professional conversations with them regarding this topic. It's a large group as represented on this chart. Now, the first 6 names almost exclusively studied the phenomena through hypnotherapy sessions with their experiencers. The remaining 2, Dr. Lear and Daryl Sims, are known primarily for their groundbreaking work on identifying the existence of alien implants and having those implants scientifically tested, just when you thought it couldn't get any deeper. In the next 6 slides, I'm going to briefly characterize each of these experts so you get a sense of who they are and what they did to contribute to abduction research. We'll look at their education, we'll look at their background, the length of time doing this research, the volume of work, and so on. This is Bud Hopkins. He's our first alien researcher. And he goes first because he's considered the father of abduction research. He's given this title because many noted researchers, including 4 of the remaining 5 that we're going to look at, launched their abduction research careers only after meeting Bud Hopkins and being convinced that he was onto something special. One of Bud's most important contributions was the creation of the Intruders Foundation. The foundation provided support for alleged victims of alien abduction. They conducted research and investigations, and they promoted public awareness of the phenomenon. Bud was a brilliant artist whose works are in a permanent collection of the Whitney Museum, the Washington Gallery of Modern Art, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, Corcoran Gallery, and many places in Britain. I have read and I highly recommend Bud's first 3 books listed here. Dr. David Jacobs, PhD, taught at Temple University for 36 years. And one of his most beloved courses that he taught was on flying saucers. Dr. Jacobs got interested in the topic of alien abduction after meeting Bud Hopkins. Although I found Dr. Jacobs to be a very genteel person in our interactions, he did not sugarcoat his professional opinions on alien abductions, as you will soon see. This is evident in his books, which I have read and I highly recommend. I found Dr. Jacobs to be very self-effacing with a great sense of humor. As he demonstrated here, when I photobombed him with my friend Yvonne Smith during one of our social hours. In his 35 years of involvement in the abduction phenomena, he studied over 1,100 cases, with many investigations lasting multiple years. Dr. Jacobs' books on the topic of alien abductions are some of the best researched and most revered in the genre. If you're playing a drinking game, the genre of drinking game, that's your first host. Barbara Lamb is another legend in the field of alien abductions. She became interested in alien abductions after meeting Bud Hopkins. She's a longtime psychotherapist, having been licensed in 1976. She is a highly trained hypnotherapist and a regression therapist since 1984. She began her research and regressing alien abductees in 1991. She worked with thousands of experiencers, including Victoria Fitzpatrick of Victoria's Secret Truth. Now, if you want a real mind bend, I suggest reading her book, Meet the Hybrids. Dr. John Mack. Anyone hear of Dr. John Mack in this room? Yeah, some heads nodding. Okay. Well, he's the most highly credentialed of all the alien abduction researchers and probably the most famous. That's what happens, I guess, when you have a medical degree from Harvard, you head their psychiatry department for 27 years, and you win a Pulitzer Prize. You get a lot of exposure. His involvement in the alien abduction phenomena allowed the subject to be discussed in public for a limited time. His lasting contributions to this topic cannot be overstated. And I highly recommend this book, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. Now, my good friend, Yvonne Smith, became interested in the subject of alien abduction after meeting Bud Hopkins. One more time, you'll get it. After meeting Bud Hopkins. Great, okay, some of you have had a long day. She has actually regressed several thousand experiencers and is one of the most competent, at the same time, most humble people I've ever met. At one of the UFO conferences that I was attending, after 30-some years in the business, they gave her a Lifetime Achievement Award. True story. She got up on stage, they gave her the trophy, and this is exactly what she said in her entire acceptance speech for a Lifetime Achievement Award. Do your job, just do your job. She grabbed the trophy and she walked off the stage. Those are my friends. Now, in her book, Coronado, which I loved, she documents a President Bill Clinton visit to the famous Coronado Hotel in San Diego during the week that a mass alien abduction took place because there was a UFO conference there. That well-documented story just might explain a lot of things. You have to think about that. Now, in 2015, I served as Yvonne's assistant du jour during the filming of a regression session for a documentary. This was the only time that I got to witness a regression. And I have to tell you, some incredible and weird things happened, like this guy starting to lift up off the couch. Months later, at a social hour, after we had time to process what had happened, Yvonne said to me, I think it was her second glass of wine, that was the strangest regression I've ever had. Lucky me. Dr. Sprinkle studied the alien abduction phenomena for over half a century. He was the founder of the Rocky Mountain Conference on UFO Investigations. That was a place where alien abduction researchers could compare notes and help the individual deal with the alien experience and integrate it into his or her life. The conference served as a focal point and a beacon of hope for hundreds of abductees, contactees, experiencers, whatever you want to call them, hoping to come to terms with their experiences. Now, Dr. Sprinkle wrote the foreword for my second book, Victoria's Secret Truth. And the reason that happened is he had regressed Victoria not once but twice, and a lot of the transcripts from those regressions were in my book. So the ultimate peer review was to give him my book and make sure that I accurately represented what had happened during those regressions, and that my interpretation of what happened during those regressions was factually correct. And then he wrote a nice endorsement which appears on the back cover. So apparently I passed muster. In tribute to him, in his book Soul Samples, one of the painful things he reports on is all the negative blowback he received from his university staff and faculty over his work in the abduction area. So to all of those who disrespected Dr. Sprinkle, I hold up the 25 June 2021 ODNI 9-page report with the paragraphs and the arrows on the back, and I say flying saucers are real. I told you so. Right, Dr. Sprinkle? Right. Now, if we take all of the work of all of these great people and we put them into one group together, we have over 200 collective years of alien abduction research. That research involves thousands of participants, all willing to tell their seemingly unbelievable stories to a complete stranger in hopes of understanding what happened. This massive preponderance of evidence cannot easily be ignored nor dismissed. And it begs the question, what in the wide world of sports is going on here? Tough crowd. Now, the task of data mining 200 years of research in order to find common ground is a tall task, but I love a challenge. So what exactly did each of our experts discover that permeated the entire alien abduction experience? Well, it turns out there are several commonly reported threads that tie together nearly every alien abduction event, and it begs the question, is it possible that thousands of people, mostly unknown to each other, have just coincidentally made up the exact same story? I don't think so, Tim. If we look at an abduction that begins in one's bedroom, which is a very common location for an abduction to begin, this is the sequence reported by thousands of experiencers. Their body starts to vibrate, and in their head they hear a humming, perhaps as a result of the vibration. They are placed in a helpless, paralytic state, frozen. Some people will say this is sleep paralysis. We're throwing that out the window for the moment. Most report they can only move their eyes and they can feel themselves breathing. Strange creatures enter the room, generally 3 short, what are referred to as alien grays. They will be taken by force, sometimes grabbed forcibly, or a light beam, a tractor beam, will float them through a solid wall, a solid window, a ceiling, float them out of the room, and they are taken aboard some form of craft. This is reported tens of thousands of times. Now, once on board the craft, the abductees generally see other abductees on the ship. Sometimes they're people they know, most often not. After a mass abduction, like the one reported in Yvonne Smith's book, Coronado, those specific abductees reported seeing each other from their social circle on board the same craft. They had gone out to dinner that night, and later, after they all went to their rooms and reported back, sometime after they went to sleep, they all wound up on the same flying saucer. And allegedly, Bill Clinton was en route to the hotel at that moment. Now, the craft walls are rounded, they're never square. Light emanates from the walls, yet light fixtures are never ever reported. The abductees are placed on tables, and calming telepathic messages are received from aliens. Sometimes surgical procedures are performed, often ova and sperm are removed. Sometimes a hybrid embryo is implanted in a female or taken. Many of those who have been on the craft report seeing vats with late-term embryos resembling humans. Many experiencers report return visits to the craft where they are encouraged to hold hybrid children that they are told is theirs. When the experiencers are returned to an approximate starting location, they are often returned with unmistakable evidence. The most common evidence are unexplained cuts, punctures, and bruises. Often the injuries are in the form of a triangle. You're going to see one of those tonight. Nosebleeds from implants are common. Victoria's grandson, Bobby, has an implant that he received, and reported in the book the whole case about how it happened. Women who have found themselves pregnant may suddenly find a baby missing at about the 4-month period. This highly threatening activity spawns many cases of otherwise unexplainable PTSD-type symptoms. It's not unusual for this activity to be multi-generational, as is the case for Victoria, her family, and thousands of others. Based upon thousands of cases that have been investigated by our 6 experts alone, there are 2 disturbing, unanimous conclusions. 1, there is a long-term, ongoing alien-human hybridization program being conducted by the aliens. And 2, if somehow the experiencer derives some sort of positive benefit from the alien contact, the experience is going to be traumatic somewhere along the way. Now, surprisingly, as you shall see, neither the experts nor the experiencers, despite all this trauma, say that it's 100% negative. Blows my mind. Now, 2 slides back, I mentioned the word implants as evidence of alien contact, because if I recall, back in 2018, there is no evidence of aliens. So if the government report on the evidence of aliens doesn't fit your bill, then hopefully this is closer to home. And if anybody wants to see these particular items I'm talking about, and or maybe arrange a test of them, I think I can make that happen. So 2 slides back, I mentioned the word implants as evidence, and in June of 1995, Dr. Roger Lear, who was a podiatric surgeon, he met Daryl Sims, who was one of the speakers at the 1995 Expo West UFO conference in Los Angeles. During his lecture, Daryl Sims told the audience that he had identified alien implants in several abductees that he'd been researching. Dr. Lear was intrigued and formed a partnership with Mr. Sims, the purpose of which was to surgically remove some of these implants and have them scientifically tested. On the 19th of August, 1995, just a few short months after their first meeting, Dr. Lear performed the first surgical removal of these alien implants. Daryl Sims is one of the world's leading authority on alien implants, and he has an impressive research resume, which I just posted here, so you have it on the video. His research is backed by scientific results, and here to tell you about those scientific results is Mr. Daryl Sims himself, who made this video exclusively for this group.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Sims. I'm one of the world's leading investigators on abductions and the evidence that's left behind during those events. My good colleague, Ray Szymanski, asked me to briefly speak to you this evening because he recognizes your need for scientific and physical evidence of the UAP phenomena. My first formal medical presentation was at the John Muir Medical Hospital for continuing education. The subject was medical complications of alleged human alien contact, implants. There is no better place to find publicly accessible evidence than the alien abduction arena. I'm a former senior military police officer and CIA operative that has spent nearly 40 years of field research locating, identifying, and scientifically analyzing physical evidence of these events. I'm a board-certified hypnotic anesthesia therapist. I have special certifications in medical hypnotherapy. As an alien contactee myself, I have used my first-person skills and extensive professional skills to help hundreds of experiencers all over the world to come to terms with what they have witnessed. I have openly shared my discoveries at conferences around the world and have been on every major radio and television program you can imagine. Right now, the best evidence of UAP phenomena is the evidence that's left behind by the alien pilots of those UAPs when they interact with human beings. Dr. Gary Nolan, a noted professor at Stanford University, initiated the UAP biomarker project with 1,000 enrolled witnesses. They used mass cytometry, brain analysis, and materials work with Dr. Jacques Vallée to collate the data. Dr. Nolan's public statement is that he is 100% certain of non-human intelligences that have been here. At the completion of actual abduction events, the abductee generally is left with conscious and subconscious memories of the event. Many of these reports are also accompanied by physical evidence of the event. The most subtle of these evidences are unidentified body marks left after a contact event. A very common but more pronounced marking left on the contactees is the so-called scoop mark. These scoop marks have been identified upon thousands of abductees. The wounds seem to be the result of a dermatological scoop in the skin. The interior of the scooped area is cauterized with a process known as solar elastosis. The next level of evidence is something I discovered in 1960, namely the alien implant. In the mid-1990s, I organized the first surgical removal of alien implants from 2 carefully selected and screened alien abductees. The strict medical and psychological profiles were used to identify these people and keep them in especially selected surgical candidates. We had many of them, but these 2 were primary. This gives the alien abduction authenticity. The implants themselves were metallic in nature. The testing that was done was double-blinded. Each laboratory was told only that the objects were foreign objects and nothing more about them. Some of the implants resembled small, slender rods, 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter and less than a centimeter long. In each case, the metal implant was surrounded by a hard, gray membrane composed of only 3 biological elements: a proteinaceous coagulum, hemosiderin, and keratin. The most remarkable fact is that in no case was any type of inflammation, chronic or acute, ever associated with these implants. According to medical professionals, this is not possible as the human body reacts to every foreign object that's introduced to it. This observation has vast implications for transplant surgery, where the patient is required to take medications to keep the body from reacting and rejecting to a newly donated organ. The National Institute of Discovery Science paid for this research. The research was done at the Chemical Science and Technology Division of the Los Alamos National Laboratory. A special microscope was constructed for the specific testing of these implants. The metallurgy of the implants was a startling find. The implants appear to be from a rare needle-like meteorite formation from the Widman-Stratton structured meteorite. Qualitative and quantitative reports are available about the metallurgy and the biology surrounding the implants. We have conducted 27 of these surgical procedures from India to the United States of America. Some of these surgeries were filmed in detail. Our work is philanthropic. We do not charge for our services. I am Darrell Sims. If you want to locate me on email, you're welcome to do so, DERRELWSIMS@mac.com. Thank you for your time this evening.
Doesn't get more scientific evidence than that, does it?
Good evening, everyone.
So, from my perspective, all the events of an alien abduction experience points to a very negative traumatic experience for those individuals. So for me, it's a hard pass. But if there is any chance here that the end justifies the means, if it's for the greater good, let's see what the experts say. Dr. Sprinkle worked at a university. It was his job to educate. He was an academic and educator. It's no surprise then that his perception of alien intent is that it is meant to educate. But this perception, in my opinion, ignores all of the experience or trauma that he often recorded and wrote about. He says the major hypothesis or speculation is that UFO activity is an educational program, a gradual and persistent conditioning of human awareness for a new age of science and spirituality. So when I looked at this conclusion, you know, there's that old saying, if you're a carpenter, every problem looks like a nail. Again, maybe your opinion on this depends upon what you did for a career. Let's examine that. Dr. John Mack was foremost a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist's classic job is to diagnose and treat damaging mental conditions. Put another way, it was his job to transform somebody's personality, which is exactly what Dr. Mack suggests that the alien abduction phenomena is all about. Regarding the question of good or bad, there is an equal amount of each. Consciousness expansion and personal transformation is a basic aspect of the abduction phenomena. I want to read this again. Consciousness expansion and personal transformation is a basic aspect of the abduction phenomena. Okay. In my opinion, this is both an understatement and at the same time a statement of the obvious. Try not to get ahead of me here. If your body suddenly begins to violently vibrate in the dead of night, and you are floated through a solid wall by a beam of light, then moved onto a spacecraft, laid on the table, and suffer an unplanned medical procedure by tall and short aliens, who, by the way, are likely not in your HMO, then you're beamed back into your bedroom, and your pajamas are now on backwards, and you are laid to rest in your closet, you are guaranteed to have consciousness expansion, and personal transformation. I guarantee you. Dear sweet Barbara Lamb is convinced that the aliens have lost their ability to reproduce and are using us to save them. And in a 2-for-1 deal, she also believes that the hybridization process will develop a less hostile, less warlike, less greedy population, making us better galactic neighbors. And finally, in our long-awaited moment of woo, she believes this will raise our consciousness so we can live in a more balanced, more spiritual way. And I'm saying this to people who dealt with nuclear bombs. So, if you've ever talked to Barbara, and I have, you will soon discover this is exactly the way that she wants the universe to act. So, why not get a little help from the aliens along the way to make it happen? Like John Mack, Yvonne Smith refuses to judge alien behavior as a negative, despite all of its negative implications. She assumes a very neutral stance on alien abduction, despite the facts. She said, you know, as far as friend or foe, I cannot count how many times I have been asked in interviews, are they good, are they bad, malevolent or benevolent? My answer has always been the same. I feel they are neither. They have an agenda which they have been carrying out for a long time. Hybridization. Apparently she missed the forest for the trees on this one, but there we have it. So I asked Yvonne to give you all a special message. Here it is.
Hello, my name is Yvonne Smith. I'm a certified hypnotherapist specializing in UFO abduction cases for the last 35 years. In those years, I have regressed several thousand people across the United States and many other countries. Regressive hypnotherapy relieves symptoms of PTSD brought on by the trauma from these contact events. These people do not suffer from any type of psychopathy. 34 years ago, I founded Close Encounter Resource Organization, CERO, which provides a safe haven for people, allowing them to share their experiences without the fear of ridicule. These experiences are physical, external events and run intergenerational. These people are from all walks of life, a cross-section of any community. Please refer to Unusual Personal Experiences, an analysis of the data from 3 national surveys conducted by the Roper Organization, copyright 1992. Thank you.
What Yvonne is referring to here is that Robert Bigelow funded a large survey of 6,000 randomly chosen adults in America. And they were given 7 questions. And then it was like, have you ever had missing time? Do you have any unusual scoop marks or other marks, scars, etc., that you cannot account for? Those type of things, which if you said yes to, would indicate that you potentially had some sort of a contact experience. Based upon the results of the Roper poll, it was estimated that 4 million Americans potentially had contact experiences. You know, they took the 6,000, got the percentage, and extrapolated it up based upon the number of people living in the United States of America. So that's what she's referring to. It's online, it's very interesting read.
Hello, Mike.
Dr. David Jacobs, one of my favorites. As a professor of history, a major aspect of Dr. Jacobs' job was, according to Dr. Jacobs, extrapolate actionable lessons from past events and historical knowledge. In effect, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. Now, to that end, Dr. Jacobs sounded the alarm bell with these heavy thoughts about alien abduction, and that has nothing to do with gravity. Aliens plan to control humanity. That is very deep. Aliens are breeding human-looking hybrids and have been integrating them into our society for the purpose of planetary takeover. That, my friends, is heavy. And we get this warning from the man who wastes absolutely no words, Mr. Darrell Sands. We are neither alone nor at the top of the food chain. Bud Hopkins, the father of all alien abduction research, he leaves us with these rather ominous notes. The 27 years I have spent working with abductees, listening to their traumatic encounters, and trying to help them heal a lifetime of psychic damage have left me hardened to reassuring talk of beings of light practicing benevolent, tough love. When abductions are viewed in terms of their physical and emotional after effects, the evidence clearly supports Jacob's more ominous hypothesis rather than Mac's more optimistic one. So, we've seen the various works and opinions of these world-class experts. Some think that aliens are doing good things for humanity. Others recognize the bad, but also recognize some good coming out of this. And then there are Hopkins and Jacobs who say the aliens are taking over the planet, the other end of the spectrum. So for me, the biggest surprise is how many of the experts actually believe that all the pain and suffering that the humans are undergoing is actually for the greater good. So armed with all of that expert background and opinion, we're going to look at some experiencers with whom I was once well acquainted. And each individual has claimed contact with alien entities. Each shared their opinion with me on the question of friend or foe. And I'll give you a little bit of their background so you can establish where they're coming from. I vetted these people to the greatest extent possible. For Victoria, for example, I researched her for 2 years, actually spent, as I mentioned before, off and on a month living with the family, had access to all the medical records, all their friends. Anything I wanted was fair game to establish the validity of their stories. So this is a photo of Victoria Fitzpatrick and her family in the mid-60s. She was born and raised in Ohio, about 50 miles from where we're sitting right now. So basically her abduction story is coming full circle tonight. In the mid-1960s, during the largest UFO flap in UFO history, a young Victoria Fitzpatrick noticed a deep scoop mark on her shin. She had absolutely no idea how she had received such a deep wound. She told everyone who asked her about it that it was her alien scoop. As an adult, she often wondered if the scoop had been taken during one of the many trips into the woods behind her house when she was a young child. She would often return from those woods to frantic parents who told her she had been missing for a very long time, and she could never tell them where she had gone. In the 1960s, those ominous woods existed behind Victoria's home, which was located on Capstan Drive, just north of Cincinnati. Now, it's worth noting that Victoria lived just a few miles downwind from the notorious Fernald nuclear production facility. That facility dumped a documented 1 million pounds of radioactive material into the local air, water, and ground. Victoria's mother was employed at the Fernald plant when she was pregnant with Victoria. Multiple medical studies have documented an exponentially higher rate of radiological diseases within the Fernald workforce in neighboring areas compared with outside control populations. Now, if you were an alien species and you wanted to study living humans who were exposed to long-term radiation, Victoria might be one of those people. Today, Victoria is a highly educated sales professional who's had a lifetime of contact experience. Although she has conscious memories from many of those experiences, many other events were revealed to her only through her regressions, which she had 4. As an experiencer, Victoria's abduction events checks all the boxes as recorded in thousands of other cases. These are some of Victoria's classic experiences. In one of her abduction events, she heard a humming noise just prior to her body beginning to vibrate violently. Her body then went into a paralytic state where she could only move her eyes. She was floated through a wall underneath the window and taken aboard a craft. In a separate incident years before, her car was stopped dead on a lonely mountain road by a hovering UFO. Some creatures then removed her from that car, and she was beamed up to a waiting craft. The words she used to describe her entry into that craft that night was zoop, and there I was, down in my car, and zoop, I was on the craft. In both events, he or she, that insectoid creatures aboard the craft, was laid on the table and had some of her eggs removed. Pictured here is one of her scoop marks. She has also been gifted with uniformly spaced triangular puncture marks and finger-like bruising after other experiences. You saw those earlier while Daryl was talking. Classically, she received telepathic communication from her abductors while on board the craft. Others in her family have had similar experiences. So despite the fact that Victoria has all this evidence, as you can see, and she knows what's happened to her, some through conscious recall, some through hypnotic regression, she actually made a statement. I believe truly that I've been part of a hybridization project, and I agreed to it, and I don't have a problem with it. I'm not sure I would be so magnanimous. Now, the next experiencer, I can definitely tell you, does not feel as comfortable about her abduction experiences as does Victoria. And she's saying that the aliens are number one. She's giving me a number one symbol here. Now, Helen, pseudonym, is a medical professional, and from our conversations, it's clear to me that she is a lifelong experiencer whose events began in childhood. And it wasn't until her children were in their early teens that she discovered that they too were experiencers. It happens like that. She is a highly competent medical professional with great credentials in that area, 30 years of experience, licensed for medical legal support, a certified first responder, employed by multiple major companies, a great resume. Well, it's no surprise then that Helen has also experienced many of the classic abduction events in her abduction experience, which begins with the usual body vibrations. But then her experience takes a sharp left turn. I know of no other abduction experience in my research, could not find any other available materials wherein the experiencer is abducted by a red blob. That was her description. Most people go, yeah, they're gray, they're insectoids, they're reptilians, the red blob. I believe that the red blob that's reported as the perpetrator is actually a screen memory that's designed to protect her from the true memory of the perpetrator. Anyway, her event then continues as she's grabbed by her legs and whisked away somewhere unknown for a procedure. She cannot remember where she goes or when she gets back. When she's returned, there are often strange finger-like bruises where she was apparently grabbed to move and taken wherever. And to me, these bruises indicate to me that she fought her abductors. As a result of her lifetime abductions, Helen has reported suffering night terrors most of her life. When she turned to her low-life, now ex-husband for support, he did not want to engage her on the topic. What makes this case extremely rare and important to the study of this phenomena is Helen's allegation that she and her children all have distinctive scoop marks seen on thousands of experiencers. To the best of my knowledge, she has never sought any clinical help to relieve her symptoms. It is very clear to me that Helen has been traumatized by her abduction experiences and most certainly does not view them in a positive light in any way, shape, or form. Now, just recently, after about 20 years of begging to get her evidence, Helen sent me photos of her scoop mark. And when I get these things, I just often experiment. I apply certain filters to them. And when I applied a certain filter to this, that's a scoop mark, but a filter's been applied. I was surprised to find that the scoop mark is in the shape of a flying saucer. Very strange. I'm going to leave that there. This artwork was created by one of Helen's children while they were in high school. At that point, Helen had not shared her experiences with her children, so she could not be the inspiration for that artwork. She did not know at that point that they too were having abduction experiences of their own. So, my point, if your child or your grandchild is drawing pictures like this, it might be good to have a conversation with them and ask them what the inspiration was for the artwork. Dr. Laurie, not to disrespect Helen or Victoria because they're both extremely bright. I had difficulty getting that out, I don't know why. They're both extremely bright and professionally accomplished. But Dr. Laurie is in the league of her own. She owns a PhD in biochemistry and through her practice has devoted her entire life to improving the lives of countless others, much like Helen and Victoria. Dr. Laurie has a long list of professional accomplishments that are unmatched by any of the many abductees that I've had the privilege to study. Based on the many conversations between Dr. Laurie and myself, I'd have to say that she is the smartest person academically that I have ever met in my life. Present company accepted. Dr. Laurie has clear conscious memories of the beginning of every abduction, but cannot seem to recall what happens to her after that. This is very similar to Helen's experience. Because Dr. Laurie knew she was an abduction victim, one of the things she did as a child was change the route that she took every day to ride her bicycle to school because she didn't want to get abducted. She clearly did so because she wanted to avoid another abduction. When she and I discussed the pluses and minuses of her abduction experience, she reasoned that her abductions were for the purpose of creating her high IQ. That was her take on it. It was for the greater good. She had no compelling evidence for this. It was just her impression. It should be noted, though, that her kids are exceptionally smart. I've met both of them. But then again, their father was a doctor. He was a jerk. So, there are some great genetics at work here. And despite all her alien-induced trauma, Dr. Laurie rationalized it as a very high price to pay for her high IQ. All right, we're hitting the final slides here. This is Gary Kent Carroll, the hero of my book, Swamp Gas My Ass. To the best of my knowledge, yeah, I know one person likes that. Isn't that great? To the best of my knowledge, he was not an experiencer or a contactee. However, he did have a close encounter with the flying saucer and the pilot. And it made him think about some implications about this. What we know, Gary K. Carroll was an American hero, who in March of 1966 intercepted a flying saucer over southeastern Michigan at the height of the swamp gas flying saucer invasion. Through the network, and you guys know how the network works, right? You're all nuclear scientists, and there's a nuclear scientist network. And once you mention you worked at Mount or wherever it is, you're in. You're vetted. So that kind of happens when you work at Wright-Patterson in the engineering field for 4 decades. So anyway, through my network, I discovered that a Colonel Carroll who lived not too far from me was stationed as a fighter interceptor pilot at nearby Selfridge Air Force Base in 1966 when the flying saucers were going everywhere. And I started to put the dots together. And I said, I wonder if he knows anything about those flying saucers. So I went to his house and I introduced myself. And I told him about the 2 books I had written previously about flying saucers. And he said, get me copies, I'll read them, and then I'll decide if I want to talk to you. So I got him copies of the books, and about a month later, he called me up and he said, there's something I want to say. So, you're going to hear about this in a minute. Much of what he told me was in a book. I interviewed him for over 30 hours, and I recorded every second. A lot of those transcripts are in the book, as is his DD-214, the DD-214 of his wingman that day, Bob Nicholson. I also used Bob Nicholson's personal memoirs that I got through Bob Nicholson's family. I also used previously classified top secret UMBA NSA documents as part of the story and other formerly classified documents. I did deep research to prove some of the things that were unwritten history that Colonel Carroll told me about that I wanted to make sure I vetted and shared with everybody. Anyway, it turns out that after a 30-year career, he retired here. He was a deputy for foreign military sales, so basically in the neighborhood. During his distinguished 30-year career as a fighter interceptor pilot, Colonel Carroll logged over 5,000 hours in the cockpit. He survived 300 missions in Vietnam, and on one of those missions was awarded the highest honor for an aviator, the Distinguished Flying Cross. His official records contained in his DD-14 show that he held many responsible positions during his long career, including that of Air Force's Iceland commander, and the story of how he got fired from that job because he was waving at a Soviet nuclear bomber. It's all in the book. And that's the funny story. This is the F-106 fighter interceptor that Colonel Carroll first piloted in 1959. He would fly F-106s until 1975. You could say that he was an expert on everything that was an F-106, including how to land one on only 2 to 3 wheels, a story which is documented in the book. And I actually found a newspaper article that backs up the story. He was also a member of the Mach 2 Club. Don't let your imagination go wild. So one afternoon in March of 1966, flying saucers were making the headlines around the country because of a UFO flap that was happening in southeastern Michigan. So great were their numbers and so qualified their witnesses that future President Gerald Ford called in Project Blue Book to investigate in his home state of Michigan. After a couple of days, Blue Book's chief UFO debunker, Dr. J. Allen Hynden, tried to explain the most prominent sightings of swamp gas. Dr. Hynden would regret telling that big fat lie for the rest of his miserable career. Also in March of 1966, Captain Gary Kent Carroll and Robert Lee Nicholson were on 5-minute alert at nearby Selvidge Air Force Base located in southeastern Michigan. When the alert klaxon sounded and woke the dead, waking everyone in the neighborhood, the pilots scrambled into their jets. In less than 5 minutes, 2 Air Force F-106s, piloted by Gary and Bob, were airborne and being vectored about in search of flying saucers. Over the next 90 minutes, they gained visual sightings of said flying saucer and captured the object on their radars multiple times. While the F-106s were in full afterburner pursuit, the object accelerated away from the 2 jets, made an impossible 90-degree left-hand turn, and disappeared from both visual sight and radar. This is Colonel Carroll's rendition of what he saw that day. He said it looked like a silvery flattened football. He held on to the secret for nearly 55 years before drawing this for me. He was absolutely positive that what he pursued at 10,000 feet going Mach 1.3 was not swamp gas, with all due respect to Dr. Hynden's expertise in rotting vegetation. During one of my many discussions, Colonel Carroll reflected on the technological superior of the alien craft that he was chasing in March of 1966 in the skies over southeastern Michigan. He mused on the implications that the alien technological superiority has for mankind.
I told you that we were armed and we had the missiles. We didn't have a nuclear weapon on board. And my impression was, I remember thinking, these damn things are going to work. If I shoot those missiles, the radar is so sketchy and indefinite, the chance that that missile is going to stay locked on all the way to the target is probably not going to happen. The infrared, there's not enough energy to believe that they would do any better. So now the 2 systems, the main system and the backup system, either one looks to be serviceable in that environment. Now what if this guy starts looking threatening to me? supposing he decides to change the game. As long as he was allowing me or tolerating me to seek him, he'd move around and manage to stay out of my grasp. Didn't get a close-up, just a visiting high look, you know? Like that Russian used to wave at me out of the tail of the bomber. Are they a potential threat? Well, they got capabilities that could certainly be brought to bear if they wanted to do that. But they have never done it. And are they going to do it? Do we think there's a probability that they'll? Probably no probability. If they were going to do something like that, certainly they would have by now shown some aggression. But we've got nothing. We still got the Russians and the Chinese and people like that. But we know that they aren't our friends either. And we do something about it. We prepare to defend against their worst inclinations.
So another 70 years from now, the U.S. government will be preparing to defend against their worst inclinations.
I told you.
Okay, so this is the photo. I'll answer every question I can right after this slide. Fair? Good.
There was a photograph, but we didn't really get a chance to see it.
That photograph? You mean the one of the Russian bomber waving at him?
Oh, is that what that was?
That was it. He had, because it was the reason he got fired, Colonel Carroll had first one copies. That appeared in the Air Force Times, and the general in Washington said, "What in the wide world of sports is going on out there?" And it was one of his pilots. And Colonel Carroll would not tell the general who that pilot was. And for 3 or 4 weeks, he was getting a call on a daily basis. "I want the name of the pilot." Colonel Carroll said, "Man, you can't be a good leader if you can't defend your guys." So finally, the general quit calling him directly, and the general's aide kept calling him. And finally, Colonel Carroll said, "You tell the general that Colonel Carroll took that photograph." And like 24 hours later, he was getting notice that he was no longer commander of Air Forces Iceland. And that's the kind of guy he was. So this is your photo op. By the way, this is a fully copyright protected video. I have given MSEMA the rights to put it on their YouTube channel. Nobody else has rights, unless they come through me, to use photographs or video in the public domain for any reason. If I find it on your website using it, I will get those attorneys who try to sue me for 50 Shades of Grays, and I will bring them to bear on you. Anyway, they let me go. So we have one photo out.
I'll call you later.
Don't you flash me. Don't you double.
This presentation never happened. You were never here. I was never here. And you're all sworn to secrecy. Thank you.